I'm Craig Huggart, and I'm an Alabama fan.
They're a good band.
Yeah. I'm a Star Trek geek, and one of the things that those of you who know me really well probably know is that one thing I find very comforting is picking my nose. So that's something to know about me. And for everybody who hasn't heard this, it's good to remember you can pick your nose, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your friend's nose. So keep that in mind. So the message today, the title is 3 Secrets to Being Single and Satisfied. And Ann, if you'll click over on the slide for me. There we go. And it could just as easily be 3 secrets to being married and satisfied. So just pay attention if you're either married or single. Okay? So, you know, that being said, there are some things about being single that are just better. We can probably agree on those things. Like after lunch today, you may have one of these conversations. You say, hey, where do you want to go eat? I don't care. How about Jim and Nick's? No, not Jim and Nick's. How about Burger King? No, not Burger King. And it just goes on and on. I don't have to do that. I just pick a place and I go. That's all I do, right? I can go to a place like the Galleria, a big mall. I can go to one store, pick up what I want, and leave. So I can do those things. I can even fart in bed and nobody complains. So in a little while, this is going to be a little unusual, but we do a lot of unusual things at this church. In a little while, I'm going to ask you to text your answers to some questions. So this is one time, instead of saying, please put up your phone, I'm going to ask you to have your phone out in a little bit, because we'll have slides on the screen, and I'll have you text your answers to some questions. And thank God, I think all the technology is working now. Whew. All right. So as we begin, I want you to declare with me what we see up there on the screen. Okay, so say it like you mean it. I have ears to hear, a heart to receive, and courage to act on all that God has for me today. I expect to hear an encouraging word that I can apply today. Now this next video clip is, I think, a good insight into the prevailing culture's view of singleness.
My name's Ronnie. Maybe you're watching ingvid.com, or maybe you're watching me on YouTube. Thanks. Awesome. I have a question for you, though. How old are you? Yeah? Okay. Are you married? No. Do you have a problem with this? Because I know before I got married, I had no problem not being married, but other people did. For example, my friends who were married, maybe they were jealous. Other people who I worked with, and people who I generally met from day to day. So, today I've got a special lesson for you people who are not married. This lesson is called, Oh my God, you're not married yet? What's wrong with her? What's wrong with him?
So that is the prevailing thing. There's a certain age, you know, different people, it's like, oh my goodness, you're 30, you're not married, or whatever. If you're not married, there must be something wrong with you. But that is definitely not the biblical view of singleness. And I think you're probably going to be surprised at what I feel like is the biblical view of singleness. So this is going to take a minute to come up here. But what we're going to see here in a second is how you're going to text your answers. So what you need to do, where you would typically put the number from your contacts or a 7-digit or 10-digit number, you want to text 22333. That's where the number goes. And then in the message part of your text message, it's Craig Huggart, and that's a 054. So text 22333, and the message will be Craig Huggart 054. And so once you do that, you're going to get something back that says you've joined Craig Huggart's session, and then you see the question up there. The question is, how many sermons on the value of singleness have you heard in the past 5 years? So you'll text your answer either A, B, or C. So A for 0, B for 1 to 5, and C more than 5.
Can you repeat those texting instructions, please?
Sure. You want to text to, the number is 22333, and what you text in the message is Craig Huggart 054. And that's CRAIG HUGGART 054. So we have one answer so far. Some people are faster than others. Okay, we'll give it a little bit more. Are we getting a few more? So I'm not going to let this go too long. We'll give it just a little bit more. Somebody has more than 5. That's pretty extraordinary. So the point of this is compare these numbers with how many sermons you've heard about marriage, or how many seminars on marriage, all those kind of things. So I think we're a little bit out of balance. So next question. Do you think you will spend more time or more of your life married or single? So that's A or B. We'll give this one a little bit. Well, I guess everybody thinks they're going to be married longer. I don't know. Wow, poll is full. So that's 25 responses it takes to make the poll full, because I'm using the free version and because I'm cheap. So this is a bit of a trick question. Think about this a second. You're born single, you get married. Your marriage is going to end either through death or through divorce. And in all eternity, you're going to be single. So everybody is going to be single longer than they're married. So you might wonder why this is so important to me, why this subject, and Chase alluded to it some, and I'm going to go into that a little bit. But February 28th, 2011, after 26 years of marriage and 5 wonderful kids, I was divorced. And that began the most difficult, dark, hard time of my life for me and for my family as well. But by the grace of God, I got through it. And I tell you, that really deepened my faith, deepened some relationships. I had some great friends. When you go through a crisis and there are friends that are there for you, those are real friends. So fast forward a couple of years, and ready to date again. I was actually sitting, I think, in my normal spot. Actually, on the bottom of that chair, it has my name on it. So I was sitting in that chair and I was thinking, life is going pretty good. I think I'm about ready to date again. And I actually started looking around the room. And let me say, this is not a great place for looking for single women. Just throwing that out. But I started thinking in my mind about available candidates. So I was ready. By God's grace, the following Friday night, I was listening to the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, a message by a man named David Pawson. David Pawson is a very solid, prominent biblical scholar, kind of a father of the faith. And his message that night was, is remarriage after divorce permissible? And his answer was no. And I know that's a big subject, and that is not the topic of this, but I wanted to give it some context. So that's your first fill in the blank on your handout if you're playing along. My position on divorce: no remarriage after your spouse or while your spouse is alive. So I didn't just go on that sermon, although I felt like God was speaking to me. I got his book on the same subject. And I read the book. My conclusion was, this guy's right. I gave it to a couple of people, or gave my conclusion to a couple of people I really trust, and they agreed. And so I felt like for me, while my wife is still alive, I'm not free to remarry. So I'm like, I really better get happy as a single person. And I gave you a couple of resources on that. I'm not, believe it or not, the only person on the planet who feels that way. John Piper's one prominent person who feels the same. So fast forward to just a couple months ago, May 11th, 2017, I received a prophetic word that was short, but it was absolutely God in my mind. And the word was, the time of grieving is over. And I received that, and I really believe I've been a different person, that was turning a page in my life, that the time of grieving is over. So your first takeaway is, happiness is an inside job. Doesn't matter, married or single, happiness is an inside job. So this is a real scene that happened. I'm just going to give you a snippet of it. So we were in marriage counseling. We were at a counselor's in Homewood, Alabama. And just as an aside, I wouldn't go to a marriage counselor that's been divorced, just saying. Anyway, so we were in that meeting, and just imagine a marriage counselor on the left, my wife on the right, and me across from them. And so the marriage counselor says, so Debbie, what do you think is the root issue? You don't make me happy. And I'll never forget that moment. And I had been married long enough to know it wasn't a good time to say something, so I didn't say anything. But the point was, that is a lot of our culture's view of marriage. If you don't make me happy, there's even a really bad song out there that says, you don't make me happy anymore, I'm going to go find me another man. It doesn't work that way. Happiness is an inside job. And ultimate sustainable happiness does not come from union with another person. It comes from union with Christ. I love how Alan Hood puts it. He says, nobody gets you like God gets you. What we really desire from our spouse is that they get us at the deepest level, but they will never get you like the Almighty God, all-knowing Creator gets you on the inside. Philippians 4 is an awesome chapter. Just want to give you a few snippets out of there. Rejoice in the Lord always. Be anxious for nothing. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, I remember Tim Tebow putting that on his eye black, and man, especially athletes love that verse. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In context, though, that verse means I can be happy in every situation I find myself in. That's what that verse means if you read the whole chapter. Happiness is an inside job. Wednesday morning I was praying, and this is a bit of an aside, but I felt like I wanted to share it. I was praying, and I felt like there was going to be somebody here, and maybe the other words apply to this kind of as well. I felt like there'd be somebody here who is living in hidden sexual sin. And if that's you, I just encourage you. This is maybe God's way of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, today's the day to get free from that. So talk to somebody you trust about that. And I would just read you this scripture as an encouragement. So David said in the Psalms, when I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away, and I groaned all day long. Finally, I confessed all my sins to you and stopped trying to hide my guilt. I said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord, and you forgave me. All my guilt is gone. Kind of along the same lines, some of you may know who John Paul Jackson is. John Paul Jackson was a very prominent minister. He's passed away at this point, but he said something that I'm going to do here in just a minute. And pray for me for strength, because this is not easy. But what he said, he was asked one time in a meeting, and I was in the meeting, and they said, what do you do when you sin, when you fall? And he said, I confess it publicly, because then when I confess it publicly, the enemy has nothing on me. So, it was over 40 years ago, and there was an older boy in my life who over a long period of time kind of wore down my resolve and coerced me into inappropriate same-sex interaction with him. That deeply affected me for many years. I never had any same-sex attraction, and I confessed this probably a year ago to a small group, and I just wanted to do that publicly because now the enemy has nothing on me on that front. And I would encourage you, if you have something like that in your past that you haven't told anybody, it says confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. Because once you do it, you'll probably be surprised at the reaction of the people around you. And it's amazing in today's broken world how many broken people with really bad things that have happened to them. Takeaway number 2, marriage can distract from happiness. Now, don't want to burn me at the stake here or anything. I am totally for marriage. My feeling is, and Agape is a great example of this, at least on one front, we should have lots of married people that have lots of kids, and then we should have lots of single people. And what you want to do is do the thing that's least distracting. For most people, that's going to be being married, but it's not for everybody. And you may find yourself in a situation through either death or through divorce that you're going to be single. But I wanted to give you a picture into the way I think maybe it should be done when we're counseling our children, and see if you can remember any time when this has happened. So this is totally imaginary. I came up with an imaginary daughter, Karen, with her imaginary boyfriend, Carl. Okay? So she's talking to me about her boyfriend. I'm sitting in my dad's chair that nobody else in my house ever sits in. And it's a lazy boy. I love it. It's great. She's sitting over on the couch. So she's over here and she says, Dad, is now a good time to talk about Carl? Sure. What do you want to talk about? I think he's the one. So tell me more about that. Well, you know he has a great job. He's a hand surgeon with Dr. Anderson's clinic, so he makes great money. And besides, he is really cute. He is tall, dark, and handsome. And, oh yeah, and he loves Jesus. And he just got back from a missions trip from Mozambique with Heidi Baker. Wow, that's pretty impressive. So how does he feel about you? Oh, he loves me. What's not to love? Well, that sounds great. You know, it sounds like to me, and I've gotten to know him a little bit, it really sounds like to me, he may be the one, and this may be the time. But have you ever considered what you're going to lose? Lose? What are you talking about? We're in love. He's awesome. No matter how awesome he is, if you married him, you will have a divided heart. Right now, all you got to do is please Jesus. If you marry him, you will have to please him as well. And I know right now that sounds like no problem. He loves Jesus. I love Jesus. What's the problem? But trust me, there will be times in your marriage where you will have to choose who you're going to please, your husband or your Lord. Dad, that sounds kind of harsh. I just want you to know, and I want you to make the right decision at the right time. Let's do this. Why don't you and I fast and pray for 2 or 3 days? And I know God will speak to you. And if He speaks to you and says, this is the time and this is the guy, I will totally support you. Sounds good, Dad. Love you. Love you too. Now, can you imagine that conversation happening? I have never ever heard of any parent having that conversation with their kids. But let's look at some verses about singleness. If you're going to study singleness from a biblical perspective, 1 Corinthians 7 is the best place to start. And it pretty much says what I was saying. Verse 32, but I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. Totally true. Now, one of the things that I certainly had a question about is, what about the gift of singleness? Anybody heard of the gift of singleness before? The gift that nobody wants? Well, I did a bit of research on it, and the best conclusion I found was that the mythical gift of singleness doesn't exist. Not the way that it comes across in those spiritual gift inventories that you take like in junior high or high school or whenever. The best thing I found was by Tim Challies. I like him. And he said, how can you know if you have the gift of singleness? Look at your ring finger. No ring, you got the gift of singleness. Ring, you've got the gift of marriage. And that's really the truth, I believe. Now, it's not it's not a hill that I die on, but I think that's true. Because I think we think of the gift of singleness is God's grace that your sexual desires just go away. It doesn't happen. And the Apostle Paul said it didn't happen to him. So I certainly don't have the gift of singleness in a mythical sense. In fact, I feel the same way about sex today as I did when I was married. And that's best expressed by this video by Jeff Foxworthy.
I learned early on in our relationship that women are complicated creatures, and once I accepted that, it made everything a lot easier for me. But I have found that because women are complicated, they like to think men are complicated too. You ever hear a group of women talking to each other? Ooh, I wish I knew what he was really thinking. Ladies, I will tell you what we're really thinking. We're really thinking, I'd like a beer and I'd like to see something naked. That's all.
So, takeaway number 3, singleness is a gift from God. So back to 1 Corinthians 7. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment, for I wish that all men were even as I myself, but each one has his own unique gift from God. Now think about this a minute. The Apostle Paul, I mean, we're not talking about some understudy, wet behind the ear seminary student. We're talking about the Apostle Paul, the one who had more impact on the kingdom during biblical days than anybody else except Jesus. He says, I wish you were all single. And you're like, it doesn't say that. Well, if you read it in context, that's what it's saying. I wish you were like me. He was single. That's what he was called to do. And if you're called to be single, be happy with it. If you're called to be married, be happy with it. There's an old song that goes like this. I am loved, I am loved, I can risk loving you, for the one who knows me best loves me most. That's what we really want. We want the one who knows us best to love us most, and that's God. So his gift was not some mythical switch that was flipped in his brain. His gift was that he was single. Because when you're single, you're free to serve the Lord without distraction. So another question. According to 1 Corinthians 7, singleness is better than marriage. And you see your choices, they go from strongly disagree to strongly agree. kind of scattering around there.
Say it again.
Yeah, the question is, according to 1 Corinthians 7, singleness is better than marriage. Interesting. That question could be read a lot of ways. That wasn't a trick question, but that was a question. So this is an open-ended question, and your answers will just appear up there, whatever you answer. What is better than singleness? Better about singleness. Oh, some answers are coming across from the other. Okay, what's better about singleness? Alone time. There you go. I think D and B are code for something, I'm sure. Undivided heart. I like that. Let's wait for one more. No distractions. Now this next video is just a glimpse from a worship band I like that Michael Ferguson actually told me about, Worship Mob. That's Worship M-O-B. And I think it's a glimpse into how the Father feels about us. Oh, what does it say now? Did I miss one? Undivided heart. No distractions. Devotion to God alone. No aggravating hubby. Hey, Chase. Man, we got some good answers after I gave up on it there. Watch TV shows you like. Yeah. Okay. All right, this could probably go on for a while. All right, so here's this video.
How astonishing, how bewildering. The ruler of the universe wants me, and he loves me. How astonishing, how bewildering. The ruler of the universe wants me, and he loves me.
The ruler of the universe wants to hang out with you and me. That just blows my mind. I mean, I look at me and I go, you know, it's hard for me to get like if I got a call from the CEO of some company that had 30 people, I'd probably go, you want to hang out with me? And I got the ruler of the universe that wants to hang out with me. And he wants to hang out with you too. And if you want more about that, I would commend Mike Bickle's series on the Song of Solomon to you. It's really good. It really goes more in depth about that. So this next quote is by Lamar Junkins. He was a spiritual dad to me. He was my pastor in the vineyard for about 17 years, and he certainly had a way with words. So his point in saying that the presence of God is better than sex is he's like, there are some times when you're in the presence of God that it's really, really good. So I want to give you 3 examples from my life. In 1985, I was at a church conference, and prior to that, I was at least thinking about suicide. And the power of God fell on me in an incredible way. I don't really even know what happened. I just know God did something deep inside of me. It may have lasted a half an hour, it may have lasted an hour, I don't know. But when I came to my senses, if you will, I was different and no longer struggled with that. It was like 20 years of counseling in an hour. That was amazing. Another time that was just really profound was after my wife left me and took my youngest son with her, I was broken in so many ways. And one of those ways was financially. I was just desperate financially. And I went on a 3-day retreat. It's just me and Jesus and my Bible for 3 days. And I was reading the Sermon on the Mount. And I had read that probably more than 100 times. But when I was reading it, God spoke to me. And the gist of what he said was, no matter what, if you pray, if you fast, if you give, I will meet your needs. And at the time, I couldn't see how. But he has been faithful to that. And then the third one happened right here. Me and Michael and Paula were praying for Monty just right back there where we typically pray on this wonderful pink carpet. God bless it. Anyway, so we were praying, and this expression came on his face. We were praying for him because he had ringing in his ears, tinnitus, for 9 years as a result of his motorcycle accident. And so we were praying for him, and he got this look on his face, and he was just crying. And what he said later was that it was like the volume was turned down and then turned all the way off. And I'll never forget that. That was priceless. So what do you have to do to make it as a single person? And I would say this applies to marriage as well. What's the one thing you have to overcome? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. You have to overcome lustful thoughts and actions. And here's a verse from Matthew about that. Matthew 18:9. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter life with one eye rather than having two eyes to be cast into hellfire. I think when the Scripture uses graphic language like that, God is really trying to get our attention. I mean, when I read this verse, I think about, some of those movies that I probably wouldn't recommend, but you have a bird pluck somebody's eye out, That's pretty graphic language. So keep that in mind. So what are the 3 secrets to being single and satisfied, or being married and satisfied, either one? So the first one is make a covenant. And I'm certainly going to expand on these, but I just want to show them to you first. So make a covenant, speak the word, and focus on happiness. So where does this covenant business come from? Job 31:1 says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? More on that in a minute, but that's the biblical basis for this. Joshua 1:8 says, this is about speaking the word. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. Now think about this. Joshua is about to lead them as a military leader, and God says to him, speak the word. I mean, that doesn't seem great to me, but I think what it speaks to is the power of speaking the word. And we spent a lot of time in James talking about that. So speak the word. And then focus on happiness. This is one of my favorite Bible verses on happiness. Psalm 16:11. You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So this is my challenge to you, to take the 60-day challenge. And I'm going to go through that. But before I do, just one other story here. I mentioned earlier about picking my nose. Some of you probably like that. Some of you probably think we'll never have him preaching again. So John Wesley said, what one generation tolerates, the next generation will embrace. So one day I'm walking by the bathroom, and one of my kids, when they were little, calls out and says, Daddy, there's a hole in my hiney. So you never know what they're going to say. Hopefully this challenge is going to be the reverse of that and cause your generations to do better than you. So I believe that this 60-day challenge can be the start of a lifelong pursuit of radical purity, increased faith, and incredible happiness. So make a covenant. So I've got a book. You guys that know me know I love books. In fact, I worked at Books A Million at one point. So he wrote this book, A Covenant with My Eyes. So if you take the 60-day challenge, my challenge to you is get the book and read it and do what it says. So the idea is that you make a covenant with your eyes to totally avoid stuff that's going to lead you to lust. And I will say this has been the single biggest powerful tool that God has used in my life as I pursue that. And when I gave this message at another church about a month ago, one of the women there, Lucy Hughes, you guys may know Paul and Lucy Hughes that do the Birmingham Prayer Furnace. She said she actually took this book and read it with one of her sons. It's really powerful. So, second thing, speak the word. So I've made this really easy for you. When Nick posts the recording of this message, there will be a couple of MP3 files out there, audio files. And one will be for single people, one will be for married people. And the way they work is, there are 10 things that I have you just say. They're all biblically based. Like one for single people is, since God is with me, I am never alone. And so I say it once, and then I say it again, so you hear me say it, and then you say it with me. So twice a day, say those 10. And then the last thing is focus on happiness. So some of you were probably here when I spoke before on happiness. So Randy Alcorn, who's just an amazing biblical author, he wrote the definitive work on happiness. It's 496 pages with lots of footnotes. But what he did was he took the essence of it and put it in this book, 60 Days of Happiness. So he distilled it down to 60 bite-sized chunks that you can read each day on happiness. And this will rock your world if you read it, because to imagine God as happy as He is pretty extraordinary, and that He wants us to be happy. So you may be thinking, well, I don't have time. Well, my guess is it'll take about a half hour a day, maybe less. But I guarantee that if you commit to do this, you'll be more effective for the kingdom 60 days from now than you are right now. And happier too. So, who's ready to commit? If you're ready to commit, you can text the word yes up there. Or you can text your name if you really want to be bold. Or you can text somebody else's name if you want them to take it. And for somebody who's really committed to doing this? Raise your hand. Anybody? Oh, okay.
Oh,
Those are for you.
thank you.
And also, I've got a few jump drives. If you want to get started right away, these have the MP3 files on them, and I'll leave these up here. But again, Nick's going to post those when he posts the recording. All right. So we're about to wrap up, and the way I want us to... Oh, did anybody... We got some yeses up there? Yay. All right. So as we end, I just want us to say this 3 times together. And you know I'm a teacher, so I do hokey stuff. So I just want us to say it a little bit louder each time, and then we'll wrap up. So let's say this like you mean it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chase.